John Stireman. He is a professor at Wright State University, and he has been studying flies for several years with various different projects. And he will be telling us more about it today. And here's your code.
Okay, are you just advanced slides too?
Yes, that's right. I want you to show them.
All right. Well, thanks, Lisa and Joshua,
Yep.
for inviting me to talk here at the Elementary Parks EcoTalk series. My talk's not going to be about research, really. I'm not presenting data. I'm just going to talk about some flies. I just want to introduce flies in their diversity and their importance to you. And I don't know, probably some of you know something about flies, probably most of you don't know much, and so hopefully I'll give you a brief introduction. Maybe in the future I can give you some more detailed, or I can get into certain fly families in more detail. I'm John Stireman. I'm a professor at Wright State University. I'm interested in insect diversity, how it evolves, and how it's distributed over space and time. My specialty is in the bristle flies, or the tachinids. I'll mention those a little bit later, so I'm kind of an expert on that group. But I'm also interested in sort of multi-trophic interactions between plants and their herbivores and their parasites. And recently I've gotten really interested in understanding the impacts of invasive plant species on insect communities. So that's kind of like my brief bio. This talk's gonna be pretty simple. First, we're gonna talk about what is a fly and what's not a fly. And then I'm gonna just relatively quickly go over sort of the major taxonomic groups of flies, just like 3 major groups. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of flies. Okay, so what's a fly? When you think about a fly, what comes to mind? Killers? Yeah, housefly, okay. So that's what people think of when they think of fly, they think of housefly. Any other flies you think about? If I say dragonfly, maybe? We'll get back to that one.
Mosquito.
Horsefly.
Yeah, so horseflies and mosquitoes, those are all flies. Well, not everybody knows that mosquitoes are flies. There's no way. But mosquitoes and horseflies and houseflies, they're all flies. And this actually kind of represents the 3 major groups of flies that I'll talk about in a bit. Okay, that's what a fly is. What is a fly not? Well, this is not a fly. You know what this is?
Mayfly.
Mayflies. They're called flies, but they're not flies. How about this? Well, dragonfly, of course, has a fly in the name, not a fly. Lots of things are called flies, but they have flies in the name, but they're not actually flies. This is a caddisfly, again, not a fly. Of course, butterflies, definitely not flies. So how do we know, how do we recognize a fly as a fly versus all these other things? What traits of flies make them flies? Well, so all flies belong to the order Diptera, and there's a big clue in the name of that order that tells you a little bit about, or gives you a hint about the most obvious feature that distinguishes flies from other insect groups. And that is that flies only have 1 pair of functional wings. Although some are wingless, which is kind of weird because they're flies that don't fly. It's confusing. So anyway, they only have, so this is their wing, and the pair of functional wings. And their hind wings, the hind wings that they inherited from the ancestors of flies that actually had 2 pairs of wings, are reduced into these balancing organs called halteres. So this is the remnant of the hind wing of a fly. And most other insects that fly have 2 pairs of wings, like this wasp. It's not always obvious. Actually, I can use my finger more than that. Anyway, it's not always obvious because sometimes these smaller hind wings are hooked to the forewings, so it looks like it has 2 wings, but they have 4 wings. So that's one of the distinguishing features. Di means 2, Ptera means wing, Diptera are the 2-winged insects. Also, if you have any questions, like while I'm talking, like, just go ahead and like raise your hand or just shout it out, or you can ask me. So that's one of the major ways we can recognize flies. Also, fly mouthparts. Flies don't have like mandibles, like jaws to chew on stuff. They have like piercing or sucking mouthparts. And there's basically, so their mouthparts are designed for liquid, the ingestion of liquid food. They cannot eat solid food. Well, not very well. And there's 2 basic types of fly mouthparts. There's the kind like the mosquitoes have, and these biting, sucking mouthparts that are long and thin. And then there are kind of like licking, sponging, lapping mouthparts like a housefly has. So kind of 2 major sort of types. But basically they feed on liquid food. So that's one way you can tell them from a wasp, because wasps have mandibles that they chew up food with, flies don't. Like wasps and some other groups of insects, flies have complete metamorphosis, so that they start out as eggs, they hatch into a larva. That larva goes through a number of different molts before it eventually pupates, and that's its resting stage. It doesn't feed, and all this reorganization happens, and then it becomes the adult, right? So it's a complete metamorphosis that we see in like a butterfly, or beetles are like that, bees and wasps, but not grasshoppers and like stink bugs aren't like that, right? They don't have a complete metamorphosis of that resting pupal stage. Does this get into detail? Okay. So fly eggs are typically, it's usually the female fly that decides that puts the larva where the food is. Most of the larvae are not that mobile, and so they're at least either in their food or near their food when they're deposited by the female. Most of the eggs will hatch very quickly after they're deposited. Some flies are live-bearing and can give birth to live larvae. They don't even have an egg stage. Some can overwinter as eggs, those, but there are exceptions. And then you probably are familiar with maybe a mosquito larvae. They're long, cylindrical bodies, often elongate or grub-like. Of course, maggots, we're all familiar with maggots, unfortunately. But one of the things you might notice about these is there's no legs on these larvae. They're like wormy things, right? And that also distinguishes flies from other groups. Like beetle larvae tend to have little grass legs. I'm probably going, I should like time this. Are you gonna let me know when
yeah, we can give you.
let me know if I, anyway, so here's some examples of some various Diptera larvae. There's lots of different sort of morphologies. Some kind of have legs, but they're not like real legs. They're kind of these like pseudopod kind of legs, like the back legs of the caterpillar. It shows the pupa, but kind of turn on the lineage of a black fly, resting stages. Just to give you some idea of the diversity of fly larvae or maggots. Okay, so the order Diptera, it's a really diverse group. There's 150 different families. Each of these families have hundreds or thousands of species, about 160,000 described species. Of course, that's only a small fraction of the true diversity because we don't know everything that's out there. It's really one of the big dominant insect orders in terms of diversity. About one out of every 10 organisms that we know is a fly, like counting everything, plants, everything. So they're very diverse, lots of species, and they have a really wide diversity of lifestyles. Like flies eat just about everything eatable. And I say eatable just because, well, so edible because a lot of things that flies eat we would not consider edible. Some really nasty things, but anyway, they do all kinds of things. A lot of them are involved in decomposition. They're flood feeders, parasites, herbivores, plant gulleters, miners, predators, pollinators, all sorts of things. we'll get into that, those different lifestyles in a bit. So I just want to cover these main groups of flies. So that are represented by these 3 flies that you guys came up with when I was thinking about flies. And I'll try not to, I'm trying to keep the lingo to a minimum here, so I don't have too much, too many big words. But I have to use a little bit, and the one group that includes the mosquitoes of flies are called the Diptera. You can think of them as the longhorn flies. Actually, nemato means thread, and sera means horn, so they're like thread horn. That name refers to the fact that they tend to have these long, segmented, thread-like or feather-like antennae. They also tend to often have long palps and kind of skinny bodies. They're delicate things, and really long legs, often, like a mosquito. This is a huge group. There's lots of different families of nematosterans. I'll show you a few examples in a minute. You can recognize the larvae. Well, some of the characteristics of the larvae of nematosterans is that they have a head capsule. They actually have a head, which we'll talk about later. Other flies don't really have a head, and they have mandibles that they can chew like a normal, respectable insect. Another thing is they tend to have pupae that, this won't make sense until I get to the third group, but the pupae are not enclosed in a larval cuticle. Sometimes the pupae are mobile, like a mosquito larva. They can sort of move around, but they don't feed. This includes most of the flies that are aquatic, right? Like mosquitoes and midges and various other fancy midges. So just some examples of nematosterans. Again, mosquitoes. This is a chironomiid midge. They're aquatic algae and phytodelphia that look like mosquitoes. Anyone know what this one is?
Crane fly.
Crane flies, yeah. So this is actually the most diverse family of flies in terms of number of described species. Gall midges, this is a black fly, fungus gnats, those kinds of things. Okay, so that's the nematosterans. Next group, all the rest of the flies are considered brachyceran. Brachyceran, brachy means short, and cera means horn, so they're the short horn, and so that refers to the fact that they generally have relatively shorter antennae, often with like a little bristle-like lista, it's like bristle-like glass segments, and they tend to be more robust bodied. Some of these are actually quite large and heavy, like some horseflies are gigantic. This shows a couple pictures of a robber fly. Here, not so long. These are kind of long, but that's all like one piece. That's like the bristle segment. And these and the brachycera can be divided into kind of to the lower and the higher brachycera, or the lower and higher short-horn flies. So the lower short-horn flies is what I'm talking about now. That includes things like tabanids, the horse flies, and their relatives. Their larvae have a reduced head capsule. It's not totally sort of hardened. They don't have the exoskeleton all the way around, and their mandibles tend to move like this rather than like this. And they kind of they're more like raspers than chewers. Some of them are aquatic, and again, here's a pupa of a robber fly. It's not enclosed in the last larval cuticle, which again will make sense when I talk about the last group, which is coming up. Here's some examples of some really beautiful flies. So a long-legged fly, these are super common. You see these all the time in the summer, skittering around on leaves. Robber flies, one of my favorites. Bee flies, of course, ear flies, snack flies. These are all members of this lower brachycera. Okay. And then the last group is the higher Brachysteria, the other half of the Brachysteria, including things like houseflies. And they also have short antennae, a relatively compact body. I can talk about specific traits that adults have that distinguish them from the other group, but let's just say that the real distinguishing traits are in the larvae of this group that distinguish them from the other ones, the lower Brachysteria. The larvae, the higher Brachysteria, basically don't have a head anymore. They've lost their heads. And instead, they just have these mouth hooks, and they just kind of rasp at stuff. And finally, when they pupate, they kind of blow up their skin, and then they pupate inside the larval skin. So here's like the larva, it kind of like stops feeding, it kind of like blows up, and then turns into this pill-shaped thing, and then the pupa is actually inside that. This is the hardened last larval skin. Many of these flies actually need to escape out of this pupil, this last larval skin, which is kind of hardened, and the way that they do it, a lot of them have this lining thing, so they have this crease in their head. From when they emerge from this puparium, this last larval skin, their head basically blows up like a balloon to pop the lid off, basically, and then it closes back in, and so there's this like hole where that balloon came out. So you can see the balloons in this. I have a video, but I'm not gonna show it to you. Look it up. Look up like fly eclosion from puparium. Crazy video. Head blowing up balloons. Anyway, some examples of the higher Brachysteria. Wait, am I supposed to stay in one spot here?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Are things like marsh flies, stilt-legged flies, grass flies, fruit flies, picture-wing flies, flower flies or hover flies, blow flies, the housefly for croup, which is a dung fly, flesh flies, a lot of these kind of more compact things. Some of the relatives of houseflies and flesh flies have this thing called a lifter. Recognize that. Let's see what this one is too. Anyway, those are some examples of the higher Brachysteria. Okay, so that's just to lay out like 3 major groups of flies. You can divide that, each of those groups, into many subgroups. So, what I want to talk about, rather than get into all the taxonomy, I want to talk about why flies are important a little bit. And it's usually when we talk about the importance of flies, we talk about how horrible they are. Because people talk about like what's the most dangerous animal, right? What's the most dangerous animal in Africa? Is it a lion? No, and the people that know something say, that's the hippos, right? Hippos kill more people in Africa than any other large mammal. But really the most dangerous animal in Africa is this right here, Anopheles gambiae, that transmits malaria. It's a vector for malaria, and there's like hundreds of millions of people with malaria. A lot of people die from it. So flies are really important in part because of the negative impacts they have on human health and health of animals and livestock and things like that. So that's usually when we talk about why they're important. They're important as enemies. And it's not just this mosquito. Lots of mosquitoes spread disease. I'm sure you've heard about different diseases popping up. Zika and H1N1 and all these things. And there's lots of other things, not just mosquitoes. Some horseflies and other flies transmit diseases. But I don't want to talk about those things. I want to focus on the importance of flies in terms of the benefits they provide, so particularly the ecosystem benefits. And we can start with just the mosquitoes. So I don't know if you know, but a lot of mosquitoes, particularly males, feed at flowers, and they can be really important pollinators for various plant species. Of course, they're also food for things that people maybe care about or are more charismatic, like birds, bats, and frogs, and things like that. The larvae are kind of like, in a sense, so that they're basically filter feeding and eating organic detritus in aquatic systems, and so they're kind of like water filters, so they kind of, that's the persistent service. But then they also provide food for lots of organisms, frogs and fish and other insects, and even sometimes other mosquitoes. So there's some mosquitoes like this Oxybutytes that actually eat. They don't actually feed on blood as adults because they get a lot of protein by eating other mosquitoes. So, okay, so I'm going to go over some of the other sort of important benefits of flies in terms of the ecosystem services they provide. How much time do I have? Are you doing okay?
I was just trying to give you a thing, but you got 18 minutes.
Oh, I've got all kinds of time. I feel like I'm taking forever here. Okay. So it's kind of disgusting, but flies are really one of the things that they do for us is they eat dead stuff. They're really important decomposers of dead animals, carcasses like the squirrel, dung, of course. Flies are famous for growing dung. They're also important decomposers in soil communities. These are just examples of ones that are decomposers in dead wood, in dead and rotting wood. So, a lot, probably, I don't know about a majority, but a lot of flies, a lot of different families, different groups are involved in decomposers, either directly or indirectly by eating fungi. And so they're kind of like nature's cleanup crew. And it's disgusting that they do this, but it's good that they do it, right? Because otherwise all this stuff would build up and it'd take much longer to decompose, and then we'd have more dead stuff, plant and animal matter accumulating. As Stephanie mentioned earlier, flies can be important pollinators. So a lot of flies, a lot of different families of flies go to flowers from all the different groups. For example, here's a crane fly going to a flower. Here's a really cute, fuzzy bee fly. I just want to like pet it. Of course, serpents, the flower flies or the hover flies. And here's a flesh fly. So all kinds of different flies go to flowers. And I think that their importance as pollinators is really underappreciated. That everybody really tends to focus on bees, and there hasn't been as much attention to how important they might be. And we can see from the previous talk that they can be super abundant in these ecosystems, probably important as pollinators. I want to say this a little bit more about syrphids because they're just so cool. I love syrphids. So syrphids are the flower or the hover flies. They're particularly well known for going to flowers and feeding on nectar and pollen. As you can see, a lot of them, probably most species of syrphids, kind of look like bees. Like you ever heard of those sweat bees that there's little syrphids that people call sweat bees that are actually flies. And of course, they're doing this so so that organisms, predators like birds and other particularly vertebrates, mistake them and think that they're a bee and don't mention them because bees and wasps are mean, right? They have stingers and they'll like perch you. So anyway, this is a really diverse family. There's like 4,000 or 5,000 species. A lot of them go to flowers, probably super important pollinators in many ecosystems. And that's just the adults. The larvae of syrphids are also beneficial generally. So the larvae of most species, well, I think it's most, but a lot of species are predators. This is a syrphid larvae, and they feed on aphids and other kind of slow-moving, phloem-sucking insects that are pests. So the vast majority are predators. Some feed on basically organic sludge, like in tree holes and stuff like that. This is a rat-tailed maggot. It has this really long siphon, so it can feed down in anoxic conditions and still breed with this siphon. Probably beneficial, at least not harmful. And this is a really weird one. It's like a little turtle or little tank or something. This is surfeit larvae in the genus Microdon, and they go into ant nests, and somehow the ants don't recognize them as being foreign, and then they just eat the ant brood. Yeah. Anyway, so they're sort of really cool, and have lots of ecosystem services they provide. So that's pollinators. Flies are, you might not think that they're flies that are predators, but a lot of flies are predators, and they're probably pretty important predators in some ecosystems. Does anybody know what kind of fly this one is? This guy here? Robber flies. Robber flies are super neat. They're often big, and they're kind of voracious predators. They look around, and they have really mobile heads, and they're scoping out for prey. They're not the only predaceous flies. So this is a long-legged fly, a little plank bug. Here's a dung fly that actually is eating another fly in a related family. And this is a really cool one. This is a shore fly called the Ophira mantis. And it actually has raptorial front legs, just like a mantis does, so it can catch its prey and eat them. And generally, and I love this picture of this fly, this big bumblebee mimic robber fly eating a honeybee. And so maybe they're not eating things that we kind of like sometimes too, but this is amazing. These guys are amazing mimics, but you'll note this is the mouth parts of the fly, and of course they don't have mandibles, so they can't chew on that fly, or on that host or prey, and so they stab their beaks in there, and then they inject proteolytic enzymes with their saliva and dissolve the body contents, and then sort of suck it back out. That's generally how those predators feed. You ever see the fly? Maybe the golden one? Yeah, kind of like what they did. Okay, one more thing about predators. Dance flies are predators, sometimes catching things bigger than they are. So this is a dance fly, a common mosquito. This is a male dance fly, and male dance flies will go out there and they'll catch mosquitoes or other things, and they'll terrorize them with their proteolytic enzymes, and then they'll offer them to females, and if the female approves, she'll let them mate with her. So here's the male that caught this fly, mated with the female, and she'll kind of let him mate with her as long as she's still feeding on the fly. It's a small prey, and she gets done with it quickly, she'll sort of take them off. This is called a nuptial gift. But anyway, the flies sometimes will catch prey and then offer it to females. I also want to mention that there are predaceous fly larvae too. Many of the lower Diptera larvae of lower Diptera, like horsefly larvae, are predaceous generally. This is a gall midge that's feeding on aphids, tiny little gall midges feed aphids. This is a phantom, it's aquatic phantom midge that feeds on tiny crustaceans like daphnia and things like that, but also occasionally things like mosquitoes. So they're also important predators in the larval stages. They're also important as parasitoids. Do you guys know what a parasitoid is? Okay, some people do, some people don't. So I'll explain it using an example. They don't all do it this way, but this is one example of parasite life cycle. One of my favorite groups of flies. I'll talk about the chickens. So I have this painting too. It sort of illustrates the whole life cycle of this fly. So these females of these flies, they go and they lay eggs on leaves, and those eggs hatch, and the larva just hangs out, and it waits. And it waits until a caterpillar comes by, and then it attacks the vibrations of the caterpillar. It jumps onto the caterpillar, and it chews its way into the caterpillar. But it doesn't kill it, it just hangs out inside the caterpillar and grows. And it just feeds on all the non-essential organs, whatever, like the fat body and stuff like that. Not touching the vital organs. And then at some point, it gets big enough and it basically liquefies the whole body contents, eats everything, and then crawls out, pupates, and then compare it. inside the last level of skin becomes an adult. So parasitoids are basically insects or other organisms that develop inside, well, they often develop inside, sometimes on the outside of other organisms like caterpillars, but they almost always kill it. Often there's just one parasitoid per host, but there can be many sometimes. A lot of parasitic wasps do this. Well, there's a lot of flies that do this too. They're important enemies of other insects. So just some examples of fly families that have parasitoids. The big-headed flies, they're kind of weird looking. Their whole head is eyes. And they parasitize like leafhoppers, little plant bugs. This is a bee-killing fly. They attack adult bees, like bumblebees, in flight and inject eggs into them and kill them. This is an ant-decapitating fly. They attack ants, jab eggs behind their heads, and then develop in their heads, and then eventually their heads fall off. This is a bee fly. Some of them are true parasitoids. Other ones, they find like bee nests, like solitary bee nests like in the ground, and they lay eggs in there, and their larvae basically just eat the bee and the pollen ball. So they're called kleptoparasitoids. They're thieves, basically. But the most diverse group of fly parasitoids, and also my favorite family of flies, are the bristle flies, or tachinidae. So this is illustrates some of the diversity of form of tachinids. All these bristle flies are all parasitoids on all kinds of different things: caterpillars and stink bugs and beetles and grasshoppers and all sorts of things. And this is sort of my specialty, and maybe at some point I'll be able to talk to you guys just about this one family. Okay, so I've tried to keep things short, so that's just to give you some take-home messages. So basically, flies are really diverse in form and in ecology. They eat just about everything. A few fly species, a relatively small proportion of flies are harmful. They can be extremely harmful, but that's a very small proportion. Even in mosquitoes, there's like 3,500 species of mosquitoes or something like that, and maybe like 100 of those ever attack humans. Maybe less than that, probably like 30 or 40. And most flies are beneficial and provide all kinds of ecosystem services. Pollinators, they're predators, decomposers, of course, parasitoids help other insect populations in control. So flies are really cool. I hope you gain some appreciation for them. And I'd be happy to take any questions. I'm just going to throw out some weird flies. These are some. That was the end of my talk, but I just want to show you a picture. These are flies that don't have any wings. These are ectoparasitic flies. These are on bats. And that one's, well, these are all many on birds. And then here's some other weird flies. Okay.
So are flies generally good at like coming into a disturbed habitat and like do they adapt well to disturbed habitats?
I mean, probably better than most bees. I think that, like, you know, with a group so big, you have all kinds of life histories. You have weedy species that are good at colonizing and taking advantage of ephemeral resources. Certainly, there are things that are good at that. There's also other things that, like, you know, need old growth forests or else they can't, you know, live. So I think, yeah, within the family, there are certainly some that are really good at taking advantage and coming into new habitats and exploiting them. I think that.
Similar to having specialist bees that are obligated to one species of plant, we have specialist flies, pollinators that are specialists in one species of plant.
Well, I don't know if there's specialization to the same degree as bees, but I mean, there are some flies that have extremely long, like probosces or whatever, mouth parts that can only pollinate or that go to these flowers with really long nectar spurs or corollas or whatever. Like especially like In South Africa, there's like horseflies that have these incredibly long beaks, and so there's got to be some coevolution, specialization going on in those things. But it's a little different because most flies don't. Well, flies and bees go to flowers for somewhat different reasons, right? Because bees are collecting pollen to provision a nest with. Some flies might eat some pollen, but they're not like collecting anything, and so I think it's less likely to see less likely to see specialization because they're not really gathering the pollen. Is there another question? Yes.
For the parasitoid category,
Yeah.
is the benefit of those basically keeping other nuisance bugs kind of under control?
Yeah, I mean, just like predators. It's kind of sad when I don't know, a fox eats a rabbit or whatever, but like it's it has to happen for things to keep in balance. And yeah, parasitoid flies and wasps and other groups. That's they feed on herbivores often, and so they keep those herbivore populations from getting too crazy, and they can be used in biological control, for example. So you can facilitate them or introduce them to areas to control pests. Lots of parasitoids have been used in that regard. So yeah, and that's the primary benefit. Of course, some do attack things that we don't really want controlled, but yeah, that's the major benefit.
Are there any parasitoids that implant themselves in humans?
Well, I didn't talk about botflies. I was thinking about, I feel a little bit of ashamed because I have some buddies that were tropical biologists and they breed botflies from their bodies, and I haven't done it, so I'm not a true tropical biologist. But yes, there certainly are botflies and screwworms. They're not big enough to like kill you. In fact, if you just let them grow, they kind of keep it pretty sterile where they feed. And so, I don't know, maybe you've heard of like maggot therapies that think you can actually clean infected wounds with maggots because they produce antibacterial secretions, whatever. So there are certainly flies that are parasites of humans, but not parasitoids of humans. That would be scary. Yeah.
I can sleep well now.
Did you have a?
Wright State has a long history with Beaver Creek wetlands. I'm wondering if, besides mosquitoes, have you ever done any research out there? For those of us who get there fairly frequently, any interesting flies we should look for besides mosquitoes in the Beaver Creek wetlands?
Well, you've seen the phantom crane flies, right?
Yes.
So those are cool. Like, they fly like this, and they have these black and white like legs, and yeah. So there's all kinds. There's marsh flies. Marsh flies. There's these often really they have patterned wings and weird antennae, and they are basically predators or parasites of snails. There's all kinds of cool stuff. You've got to look around, and I guess they're even cooler if you know a little bit about like their interesting life histories too. Like once you can recognize, oh, that's a marsh fly, then oh, that has this cool ecology as well. Is that are we good? Oh, okay, one more. Or as many more as you
Really
want.
no question, but what do mosquitoes get out of biting us? Is it food? Are they getting blood that's feeding them, or what?
Yeah, so what do mosquitoes get out of biting us? So if only female mosquitoes bite, males don't, because males don't have to produce eggs, right? And the conditions in which mosquitoes tend to live, like containers and stuff like that, there's not that much food. Like the larvae grow up, but they're not getting that much nutrients. And so in most mosquitoes, females have to get additional protein and nutrients to produce a brood of eggs, and that's why they bite you. So they come and bite you, they process all that, make it into eggs, go lay eggs, and then bite you again.
So, do male mosquitoes have any feeding habits at all, or is it just once they become to get into their adult form, do they just procreate and die?
So I don't know if I mentioned that, they definitely will go to flowers. So some they'll feed on nectar, and so they might behave, or they might act as pollinators. And some female mosquitoes will also go to flowers in addition to blood feeding, just to get sugars. But that's not a very good resource for making eggs, so it's not enough. But yeah, I don't think they're super long lived, or males are kind of there to mate, so they probably don't live as long as females, but they do feed a little bit.
Yeah. So is black flies, green flies, horse flies, are they also just eating when they bite us?
Yeah, it's all good. It's all females. Well, male horseflies, I think actually male horseflies might bite, but for black flies and sand flies and mucians and those kind of things, it's females, and they're just biting to get a blood meal that they can get protein and nutrients to produce eggs. Yeah, generally males do it.
Really, this is probably pretty confusing, but I'm really thrown by the whole there are flies that don't fly. So, what actually defines a fly versus a different insect?
Well, like I said, I mean, one distinguishing characteristic is they have just two wings, and then that second pair is modified to those halteres. So that, I mean, what defines a fly is the evolutionary lineage that we call flies, right? But that lineage has certain traits, like the two wings and the halteres. They tend to kind of not have softer bodies. They don't tend to have like a wasp face like bees.
I guess I was thinking more of like if someone was like, oh, I have this new species of insect and want to figure out what it is, how are we going to lump that into a fly? If it doesn't have wings, how are we lumping it into fly versus other?
Yeah, well, it's people that really know flies, and so they know what characteristics to look at for, in addition to the wing characters, which are not going to be there on like this fly, like this crazy looking hairy thing. There are other, characteristics, genitalia, structure of the mating apparatus, abdomens, structure to the head that can be used. Yeah. I think there was one last question.
Another mosquito question. Is there, it does seem like some people are more attracted to mosquitoes than the person sitting next to them. Is that just coincidence, or are some people providing better protein, or what's the deal?
So I'm not up on the latest, so I don't really study mosquitoes that much, and I'm not up on the latest research. But yeah, so mosquitoes are attracted to CO2 that we exhale, but also like body odors. And there's some that are attracted to the feet. The fellows smell the feet, and they always go down low. And I don't know the exact compounds, but we vary in terms of, it's not like if you stink more, you'll attract more mosquitoes. It might be the composition of the odors, that attract them. But yeah, it could be things that you're not even aware of, right? There's odors that you don't even detect that they're smelling. And I don't know what those are exactly. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right.